Paid on Friday, broke by Monday. How did families make every dime count? Here are 25 money tricks from the 1930s you've never heard of. And the last one will absolutely shock you. 25. Envelope budgeting kept every dollar in its lane. In the 1930s, a paycheck was cashed Friday and instantly divided into paper envelopes. Rent, groceries, coal, clothing, savings. Once an envelope emptied, spending stopped. This system worked because it made limits visible. You couldn't cheat paper cash. Families swore by it, avoiding overdrafts or surprise bills. Today's digital envelopes in apps like YNAB or bank subaccounts copy the exact same discipline. Simple, rigid, and brutally effective, envelope budgeting turned fragile wages into reliable survival strategies. 24. Cash jars on the shelf meant no cheating the budget. Some households used glass jars instead of envelopes. One jar might hold milk money, another school fees, another the church tithe. You could see when coins dwindled, and that visibility curbed temptation. Kids learned financial discipline just by watching jars fill and empty. Housewives often lined them in the kitchen, where everyone could see the stakes. The clear glass system was honest. No hidden debts, no magical money. Modern piggy banks and saving jars trace their roots back to this practice. 23. Taking in boarders turned spare rooms into steady rent. Many working families survived the Depression by renting out spare bedrooms or attics. Boarders, often single men or migrant workers, paid weekly for meals and lodging. A couple of dollars a week could cover rent or groceries. By 1930, nearly 10% of urban families reported taking boarders. Privacy vanished, but survival came first. Today, it's echoed in Airbnb or roommate rentals, turning unused space into income. Back then, it wasn't a luxury. It was often the difference between eviction and survival. 22. Rent parties kept the landlord paid and the lights on in black communities of Harlem and Chicago. Rent parties became lifelines. Families hosted gatherings with food, music, and dancing, charging a small admission. The proceeds went straight to rent. These parties kept thousands from eviction during the 1930s. Legendary jazz musicians even cut their teeth at such events. It wasn't just survival, it was culture born from hardship. Today's crowdfunding echoes the same principle. When you can't pay a loan, community support turns bills into a shared responsibility. 21. Mending and repair before replace stretched clothes for years. New clothes were a luxury in the 1930s. Families patched holes, turned collars, darned socks, and even cut down adult coats to fit children. Singer sewing machines became household staples. A well-mended garment might last 3 times longer than store-bought cycles. Newspapers printed repair guides, and schoolgirls learned sewing as a life skill. While today fast fashion encourages replacing, Depression families lived by the rule: make it do or do without. Resourcefulness was their strongest currency. 20. Bulk buying with neighbors made wholesale prices possible. When wages were thin, neighbors pooled cash to buy flour, sugar, or coal in bulk at wholesale rates. A 100-pound sack of flour cost less per pound than weekly bags. Cooperative buying clubs sprang up in cities, and rural families sometimes split wagon loads of supplies. Sharing meant lower prices and stronger community ties. Modern warehouse clubs like Costco echo this tradition. But in the 1930s, it wasn't about saving a little. It was often about staving off hunger. 19. Saving the first dime rule built tiny but steady wealth. Workers were urged to pocket the first dime of every dollar earned. On a $15 weekly wage, that meant $1.50 straight into savings. No excuses. Over a year, that added up to nearly $80, enough to cover rent or buy a winter coat. Many savings and loan associations promoted this habit with slogans. It wasn't easy during the Depression, but those who stuck to it avoided total collapse when emergencies hit. Small, consistent savings quietly built resilience. 18. Second-use cooking fat. Fueled meals and saved pennies. No drop of bacon grease or lard went to waste in the 1930s. Families collected fat in coffee tins, reusing it for frying potatoes, making soap, or greasing pans. Some even sold rendered fat to soap factories for cash. During the Depression, fat reuse cut grocery bills by 10 to 15%. Housewives magazines printed endless fat tricks. Today, while health trends moved away, the practice shows how thrift and creativity turned scraps into survival. Nothing was ever thrown away. 17. Layaway plans kept families out of debt traps. Before credit cards, stores offered layaway. Customers paid a little each week until the item was fully covered, then took it home. No interest, no debt, just patience. In the 1930s, layaway kept families from spiraling into loan shark debt for essentials like coats or furniture. Even big chains like Sears relied on it. While slower than swiping plastic, it taught discipline. You only owned what you could truly pay for, not what you wished for. 16. Pawn shops served as the working man's emergency bank. Pawn shops boomed in the 1930s, often called the poor man's bank. Families pawned watches, instruments, or tools for a few dollars to buy food, then reclaimed them when wages arrived. New York pawn shops reported handling millions of loans annually during the Depression. Rates were steep, but access was immediate. For many, pawning was preferable to eviction or hunger. Pawn tickets were as common as pay stubs, a lifeline when no formal credit existed for the working class. 15. Coal clubs pooled cash to buy cheap winter fuel. Coal was life in the 1930s. Heat, cooking, hot water. Families couldn't always afford a full ton, so neighbors formed coal clubs. Everyone chipped in, buying in bulk for less per pound. Records show some urban neighborhoods in Chicago and Pittsburgh saved up to 25% this way. A shared wagon delivery meant no one froze. Cooperation turned survival into community power, and coal clubs stood as grassroots insurance against the biting cold of Depression winters. 14. Victory gardens before the war cut grocery bills in half. Though famous in World War II, victory gardens began in the Depression. Families planted backyards, vacant lots, and even rooftops with beans, carrots, and potatoes. City reports show some households slashed food costs by 40 to 50% in a single season. Government pamphlets encouraged self-sufficiency long before rationing. Kids learned gardening in schools, and surplus produce was often traded. Fresh vegetables weren't just savings, they were health insurance in an era of thin wages and poor diets. 13. Clotheslines and washboards replaced costly laundries. Electric washing machines existed, but cost beyond reach. Working-class families relied on galvanized wash tubs, wooden washboards, and long backyard clotheslines. Soap was homemade, labor was sweat, but laundry bills vanished. Families saved up to 10 cents a pound by avoiding laundromats. Women's magazines even ran contests for the best laundry hacks. Clean clothes weren't luxury. They were survival, often scrubbed raw by hand. Every shirt stretched an extra year thanks to washboards and the relentless sun. 12. Shoes were resoled 3 times before buying new pairs. Shoes were expensive, often $3 to $5 a pair, when weekly wages hovered around $15. So cobblers thrived. Families wore shoes until soles thinned, then paid a fraction to have them resoled, sometimes 3 or 4 times. Children's shoes were stuffed with cardboard when money ran out. Shoe rationing during the war only cemented the habit. Resoling stretched footwear lifespans to years, not months. Every saved dollar mattered, and cobblers became unsung heroes of Depression thrift. 11. Homemade soap and cleaners saved families hard cash. Factory-made soap was pricey, so families boiled fat, lye, and water into blocks of homemade soap. Housewives also mixed vinegar, baking soda, and borax for cleaning. This cut monthly expenses by several dollars, serious savings when food budgets were tight. Rural women sold extra bars at local markets. Safety warnings were constant. Lye could burn skin, but thrift outweighed risk. By the 1930s, nearly half of rural households reported making their own soap at least once a year. 10. Hand-me-down chains dressed entire families on one wage. Clothes weren't wasted. They rotated down the family line. An older brother's shirt became a younger brother's school uniform. Dresses were altered for sisters. In large households, one garment might serve 3 or 4 children. Some mothers even cut down men's suits into coats for boys. A 1934 survey showed 60% of working-class kids wore second-hand clothes. Pride took a back seat to thrift, and hand-me-downs became the unofficial department store of Depression families. 9. Factory canteens replaced expensive restaurant lunches. Big employers often operated canteens serving meals at cost. For 15 cents, workers could get stew, bread, and coffee, cheaper than the 30 to 40 cents at diners. In the 1930s, Ford's factories in Detroit fed thousands daily. Some firms even deducted lunch costs directly from pay envelopes, ensuring no credit debt piled up. For single men especially, factory cafeterias meant calories without financial ruin. Cheap, hearty food kept workers productive while protecting fragile wages from restaurant markups. 8. Seasonal work stashes bridged the winter layoffs. Industries like construction, farming, and canning shut down in cold months, leaving workers unemployed. Smart families squirreled away part of summer earnings into winter stash funds. In mining towns, company credit was sometimes offered, but interest was brutal. Instead, men set aside $1 or $2 weekly during peak work, enough to last lean months. Survival wasn't about steady jobs. It was about planning for gaps. Those without stashes often joined breadlines by January. 7. Rainy day coffee tins hid savings from temptation. Coffee tins with slotted lids doubled as secret banks in many homes. Families dropped nickels and dimes in, hiding them in cupboards, attics, or under floorboards. Some even buried them in yards for safety. In 1933, when banks collapsed, hidden tins kept households afloat, while official savings vanished. A jar with $20 inside could cover rent. The practice wasn't paranoia. It was hard-earned wisdom that cash you control is safer than promises on paper. 6. Icebox tricks kept food fresh days, longer without waste. Before modern fridges, families relied on iceboxes, wooden chests cooled by large ice blocks. Housewives mastered tricks to stretch perishables, wrapping butter in wet cloth, keeping the milk near the ice. storing produce and newspaper. Ice deliveries cost 25 to 50 cents a week, so minimizing spoilage was crucial. Families claimed careful storage could stretch milk by 3 days and meat by 2. Every extra day meant fewer grocery trips and more meals squeezed out of a fragile budget. 5. Ration-style meal planning cut grocery runs to the bone. Even before wartime rationing, Depression families practiced strict meal planning. Housewives mapped 7 days of meals, stretching beans, potatoes, and bread into endless combinations. A 1932 USDA survey showed working families spent over 30% of income on food, so trimming waste was survival. Leftovers were reimagined. Sunday roast became Monday hash, Tuesday soup, and Wednesday sandwiches. Careful planning turned $3 of groceries into a week's worth of meals. Discipline at the table protected wallets from collapse. 4. Housewarming bees swapped labor instead of hiring help. When a family moved or built a home, neighbors gathered for a housewarming bee. Everyone brought tools, food, and strong backs, tackling tasks like roofing, hauling, or fence building. No money changed hands, but debts of gratitude were recorded. Rural surveys from the 1930s show these events cut building costs by 40 to 60%. Communities without cash survived through cooperation. The tradition survives in volunteer barn raisings, proof that shared sweat is stronger than shared dollars. 3. Paper routes and odd jobs kept kids contributing to the pot. Children were economic lifelines. Boys delivered newspapers before dawn for pennies per copy, while girls babysat, sewed, or helped with laundry. By the late 1930s, nearly 1 in 5 children under 16 worked part-time. Their dimes often bought bread or coal for the family. Odd jobs taught kids discipline, but also revealed harsh realities. Survival wasn't just a parent's burden. It was a household affair where even small hands mattered. 2. Barter with neighbors traded goods instead of spending cash. Cash was scarce, so goods and services flowed by barter. A shoemaker might fix boots in exchange for potatoes. A farmer might trade eggs for a haircut. By some estimates, barter accounted for 20% of rural transactions in the early 1930s. It bypassed banks, interest, and credit altogether. Everyone's skills and surplus mattered. Today's swap groups and online barter forums mirror the same principle. When money dries up, creativity and trust keep communities alive. 1. Cash-only living kept families from drowning in debt. For most working-class families, borrowing was a last resort. Cash ruled everything. If you couldn't pay up front, you did without. Loan sharks existed, but their brutal interest rates trapped the desperate. Living cash only meant fewer luxuries, but less ruin. By 1935, only 12% of households carried formal debt, compared to over 75% today. The philosophy was simple. Control the dollar in your hand, because promises to pay later often ended in heartbreak. Thanks for watching. If you love these forgotten 1930s money tricks, check out our other videos packed with hidden history. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss the next surprising survival story.